Good morning and welcome to the Multnomah County Board of Commissioners Board Briefing. Chair Vega Peterson is excused. Audience members, I want to start by asking you to please silence your electronic devices for those presenting today. Please turn your mic on when you begin speaking and off when you've completed your remarks. For all presenters, please state your name for the record before speaking or responding to questions. Our first item this morning relates to a budget note, the proposal to implement the ADA, or Americans with Disabilities Act, transition plan within 10 years. And this was a budget note from Commissioner Moyer. So I'm going to ask, before we get to the presenters, that Commissioner Moyer, do you have some framing comments you want to provide, please?
Yes, thank you. I brought this budget note forward for a number of reasons. One of which is that Multnomah County, like most state and local governments around the United States, is not fully in compliance with the ADA. The ADA passed in 1990 and required public entities to make sure that our sidewalks and buildings and other areas of public accommodation were accessible to individuals with disabilities, particularly those who use wheelchairs and other assistive devices for mobility. I want Multnomah County to be an example of prioritizing accessibility. And I also think this is a unique opportunity as our economy slows and the construction industry has been impacted. One of the things as a former contractor I'm aware of is most public projects are really outside the reach of small companies, particularly minority and women-owned companies. And these type of projects, ADA ramps, crosswalk work, is an area in which projects are of a size that small companies can be competitive and win. And so with those two priorities, I asked our Department of Transportation and our fiscal office to look at what opportunities are available for us to potentially fast track ADA compliance and maybe hope ideally that some of or a large chunk of that work could fall at a time in which we are seeing a significant slowdown in construction. So that was the intent of my budget note, and I really look forward to this presentation. Thank you.
Thanks, Commissioner Moyer. Good morning. We have a presentation. You want to go ahead?
Yeah, I'll kick us off. So good morning. My name is Margie Bradway. I go by she, hers, and I'm the Director of Community Services. Thank you, Commissioner Moyer, for this opportunity. I call it the what would it take exercise. What would it take to build and complete our ADA transition plan in 10 years, and what would it take financially to fund it? I'm going to hand it off to John before the presentation, but I do want to recognize that we have Eric Ariano in the audience who helped us kind of walk through the different bonding scenarios, and he is also available to answer questions when we get into the Q&A on this. So with no further ado, I'll hand it off to Director John Henderson. Yes.
Thanks, Margie. Good morning, Vice Chair Brim Edwards, Commissioners. My name is John Henriksen. I'm the Transportation Division Director and the County Engineer in the Department of Community Services. Next slide, please. So for our agenda today, I'm going to start with the text of the budget note and then talk a little bit about the Transportation ADA plan that guides our work, including the progress made to date and the ramps that are remaining to improve. And then I'll cover the 10-year replacement plan that we've developed, including the cost schedule and funding options to implement the plan, and finish up with our recommendations and answering any questions that you have. Next slide, please. So budget note 7 stated that it is policy of the board that sustainable sources of funding be identified that are sufficient to complete the county's ADA transition plan, the plan within a period of 10 years. We developed a report that responds to all the questions contained in the budget note and turned it in for the board's reference with the agenda placement request for today's briefing for your use. The remainder of the briefing today is a summary of the information that's contained in that report. Next slide, please. So in March 2023, the board adopted the ADA transition plan that was proposed by the Transportation Division. The basic premise of the Americans with Disabilities Act is that if something is accessible to anybody, it should be accessible to everybody, or it must be accessible to everybody. That plan identified 530 non-compliant ramps or missing ramps and estimated a cost of $38 million to bring them into compliance in 2023 dollars. The plan did not address sidewalk width or sidewalk obstructions or other impediments to mobility. Since that time, we've also added pedestrian traffic signal button improvements to the plan, and their replacement is included in the cost of the 10-year plan. Next slide, please. So this slide shows some of the features that we're talking about when we talk about curb ramps. These ramps are on Gleason and Market Drive in Fairview. The ramps in the foreground have been replaced, and they feature the tactile domes that a visually impaired person would use to know where to cross the street safely. The ramps on the other side of Gleason that would connect with these have not been replaced yet and would be part of the future program. Next slide, please. On this slide, contractors with oversight by county staff are installing sidewalk upgrades on, as part of the two ongoing capital project on 257th in Troutdale. Next slide, please. Since the board approved the ADA transition plan, we have completed 148 curb ramps replacements and new installations. We've done 77 via capital projects, like the 257th project, with 14 more scheduled for next fiscal year. We've done 18 via private development and are holding funds to build 8 more in the future when the time is right for those ramps to go in. And then we've completed 53 via one-time only general fund requests, and we have 6 more that are scheduled to be completed by the end of fiscal year 26. Next slide, please. That leaves 435 curb ramps left to be completed in the 10-year plan. To develop the plan, we looked at the location of the ramps in relation to each other that are remaining to be replaced, their criticality scoring in the transition plan, and then grouped them into 8 packages. We're proposing that each package be delivered in a roughly 3-year cycle of design, right-of-way, and construction. Right-of-way takes at least, design takes about 1 year. The first 2 packages could be in design in fiscal year 27. Right-of-way takes at least a year, and then procurement 6 to 8 months, followed by construction of 4 to 6 months for each package. If we started in fiscal year 27, fiscal year 29 would be the first year that all 3 phases would be active, and then the program would be completed by fiscal year 2036. Next slide, please. This slide's a repetition of a table from the report and shows the proposed 10-year delivery schedule for the 8 packages. Each package is color-coded so you can see when the phases of the package happen. For instance, the package called Cherry Park Road North and Troutdale Road, which includes 63 ramps, could begin design in fiscal year 27, right away in fiscal year 28, and then be constructed in fiscal year 29. This cycle continues for all the packages until fiscal year 2036, when the last package of 36 ramps is constructed. Next slide, please. To develop cost estimates for each package, we assumed the base year of fiscal year 26 and escalated the cost of each bundle to the middle year of the delivery cycle for that bundle. We also added a 20% contingency to the total cost of each bundle estimate to cover any unforeseen complications with that bundle and any unexpected cost volatility. The total estimate per curb ramp in 2026 dollars is $50,000. Including $10,000 for design, $5,000 for right-of-way, and about $35,000 for construction. Next slide, please. This is another table replicated for the report that shows the cost estimate for each bundle and the funds needed in each fiscal year to deliver all of the work that is underway in that fiscal year. The lowest amount of funding needed would be in fiscal year 28, when the program would cost about $1 million. And the most would be in fiscal year 29, and again in fiscal year 33, when the cost would be about $4 million. The average cost per fiscal year is about $3.1 million to deliver all the ramps in a 10-year period. Next slide, please. So the next 3 slides are from the appendix of the report and show the location of the bundles on the year that bundle would be constructed. The main takeaway from these images is that from fiscal year 26 to fiscal year 32, we'd mostly be working in East County and would replace all of the curb ramps in Fairview, Wood Village, and Troutdale. Next slide, please. In fiscal year 32 and 34, the ramps on the Willamette River bridges and in the Bridle Mile area and in Dunthorpe were completed. Next slide, please. And in fiscal year 34, the ramps that are out on the Wapato Bridge would be completed. Next slide. We looked at several options for paying for the 10-year program, independent of the funding source, including pay-as-you-go, where we would budget annually for the ongoing expense until the program's completed in 2036. We looked at issuing 20-year bonds to cover the $31 million program cost. The annual payment for those bonds would be $2.5 million, and the interest cost would be $19.8 million. And then we also looked at issuing 10-year bonds, to cover the program costs, the annual payment would be $3.8 million, and the interest cost would be $7.2 million. Next slide, please. Potential sources of paying for the program include the general fund, using annual one-time only allocations. This is how we've been funding the non-capital ramp upgrades for the last several years. Also, we could use state highway fund, which is a combination of state vehicle registration fees, gas tax, and weight mile tax that the county receives annually to fund our transportation programs. Or we could use the motor vehicle rental tax, a 2.5% tax on all vehicle rentals in Multnomah County. Next slide, please. Some consideration for the different revenues for the pay-as-you-go option using the general fund assumes there's enough one-time only funds to cover the cost of the program each year, which is, as I said before, $1.1 million to $4 million, depending on the program year. Using the state highway fund reduces funds available to meet other critical system needs, including maintenance and capital improvements. And using the motor vehicle rental tax, it won't be available to be used for this purpose until 2031. Next slide, please. Some considerations for bonding. The positive about bonding is that all of the funds are available up front, so we could complete the project quicker. We wouldn't have to wait for funding. That hedges against uncertainty and saves on inflation costs. But the negative of bonding is that the interest cost is pretty high, and doing the project quicker wouldn't necessarily offset that cost. Next slide. Finally, we recommend our findings or our recommendations, which are also contained in the report, is that we construct the project over the 10-year period using the pay-as-you-go model. Funding would be a combination of the general fund, state highway fund, and motor vehicle rental tax when it becomes available. At this time, we do not recommend bonding because of the interest cost associated with it. Bonding makes the most sense when a project needs all of the funds immediately and you want to do it right now. Next slide. That's our presentation, but we'll be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Great, thank you for the presentation. We are going to start with any questions or discussion. We'll start with Commissioner Jones-Dickson.
Yeah, great. Just one question regarding ramps. One of our community members asked if there isn't a sidewalk that leads to the ramp, do we still install a ramp on the corner? It might be a weird, I thought that was an interesting question. And then how do we pick and choose?
So it depends on the specific situation. Generally, if we touch an intersection, we would add the ramps, even if the sidewalks haven't been installed yet. There's an example of that, I think, at Sandy and 223rd. The risk with that is that the future sidewalks can move around. You might change the width of them, you might change the location of them, you might have to redo the ramps. But generally, the rule is that if we do work in an intersection, we have to put the ramps in no matter what.
Got it. Great. Thank you. And then I'm assuming that we've communicated this to the 3 cities. Is there a plan as far as letting them know as far as the next, providing the same presentation to Troutdale, Wood Village, and Fairview?
Yeah, we're happy to. I think this is the very first start in this presentation, and obviously this is your budget, so want to make sure you get your input before we do any external outreach.
Yeah, great, thank you.
Sure.
Thank you for bringing this forward.
Great. Commissioner Singleton?
Thank you, Vice Chair, and thank you, Commissioner Moyer, and Department for putting this together. I really appreciate the thoroughness of this presentation and the work. I just have a couple of questions. On one of your slides, you referenced the State Highway Fund, that it would reduce funding available for other critical transportation needs. Can you talk a little bit more about examples of what those are?
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate the question. So the State Highway Fund is a mix of the gas tax and other sources that we have for the roadway, but that includes all maintenance, all operations. I would be remiss right now to not recognize that we are in a huge flood and storm, and our crews are working very, very hard right now out there to try to stabilize slopes and keep the roadways open for the traveling public. That's your State Highway Fund at work. We don't have, kind of a separate operations fund and a separate capital fund. So whatever we do in manpower to try to maintain and operate our current system, that either takes away from our capital investments or vice versa. We're trying to balance that right. And as I think you're all aware, we have a declining gas tax as a revenue source. And I think it's worth saying I'm not confident. I can't estimate what's going to happen on ballots. I have to be very careful. I also manage the elections office, but I'm not confident that we will get additional state gas tax dollars at this time. Let me put it this way, I'm not assuming that in our base budget going into FY 2027. So with that, we don't have any more State Highway Fund, and it's a declining revenue, and we have a lot of needs for it. Did I answer the question? Yeah.
Thank you. What's different? How is this 10-year plan different from the plan that was adopted in '23?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the plan that was adopted in 2023 identified all the needs, but it didn't identify funds to actually do the plan under any particular timeline. So the assumption was that we would replace the ramps as we got funding available, and that's what we've been doing as part of capital projects or with the one-time only asks. But this plan is a specific kind of organization of all the work that needs to be done and then how it could be completed in that period.
And so was the original plan, I know you said it didn't have a timeline, however, you had some sense of time now of how long it would take to implement?
I wouldn't say that we had a sense of time. We just knew that it was something that we had to do and include in our work plan each year. So we were doing it as opportunity presented it. It was a high priority for us, but we didn't have a particular schedule to complete it on because we haven't identified funds out into the future to do it.
Thank you. My last question, if there were, I'm not pretending this is our reality today, but this plan goes out for 10 years. So if there were additional resources that were available in OTO to the department, would you actually be able to accelerate in any 1 year outside of what we're kind of assuming right now? It's about 1 million, it seems like, a year that comes into the budget for this out of our video lottery. If there were additional OTO, would you be able to accelerate in that year and get more ramps in?
Yeah, absolutely. We would be able to adjust our program and do as many ramps as we had funding for in any given year.
Thank you. That's all my questions.
Thank you. Commissioner Moyer?
Yeah. What has, over the past, I'll throw out 5, maybe you don't know, how much money has been dedicated each fiscal year to ADA ramp?
I think we can answer this together.
So we've gotten one-time only funds for 3 years, I think, in a row. And that probably is around $5 to $6 million total.
Yeah, so I believe we got about 2 million. Then we got just, again, a little over 2 million, and then just under 2 million. So somewhere, I think it's probably closer to 6. We usually submit for 3, to be honest, and then it gets negotiated down during the one-time only process to about 2.
And then we've also been spending money out of the capital projects that we've been doing, but I wouldn't know off the top of my head what the proportion for the ramps are versus the other work that was part of that project.
Yeah.
This is probably a Jenny Madcore question. What is the legal liability for not being in compliance? And has any local entity been sued over ADA?
Thank you, Commissioner. I can't speak to whether other local entities have been sued, but the ADA has a full variety of remedies available for noncompliance. Of course, being in compliance is also being in compliance with our plan. So we are working towards our plan, which means we are in compliance. So from a legal strategy, that puts us in a defensible position, but one that we need to take seriously and continue to move forward with.
I actually can answer the legal question because I worked for the law firm that sued. The city of Portland is in a settlement agreement related to ADA ramps, as is the state of Oregon. Neither are currently in compliance with that settlement. And I have concerns, which is more of an us issue than a department issue, of this issue being bumped down the priority list for 35 years since the ADA passed. And so, I get worried. I would be completely comfortable supporting a 10-year plan of one time only if I thought that it wouldn't continue to drop in our priority list. And some of me worries that if we don't make some kind of definitive decision, that will continue to happen. So, obviously, these are hard conversations with our multitude of priorities, but I really appreciate this work, and that this was not just a futile exercise in indulging me. I feel like seeing it on paper and seeing the totality of the work and what it would take to have a plan to actually finish this in 10 years, I hope can really inform our conversations as we go in to the 2027 budget, because large long-term projects can be daunting to think about how you chip away at it and see an end. And I'm hopeful that we can take this work into the 2027 budget conversation and make a commitment over 10 years. And I'm sure some years will move some of those dollars a little bit, but I really, really appreciate being able to look at it in its totality, look at what it would cost us, and be able to have those conversations about, are we going to stay on track with the budgets we're putting forward? So I thank you for your work. I really appreciate it.
Great. Thank you, Commissioner Moyer. Any other comments? I'll just close by saying I really appreciate the what would it take exercise, because I think often the way these projects don't happen is nobody asks that question. So thank you, Commissioner Moyer, for asking that question. I think I share your concern about, Commissioner Moyer, about the sort of just what happens in the annual budget process. We have priorities, and this seems like, well, we haven't done it for 35 years. What's another year stretching it out? So that would just be a concern I would have, just in terms of discipline. I know, having served on another body that had lots of old infrastructure, the Portland Public Schools, the question of being out of compliance. There wasn't a lawsuit, but we had very compelling testimony from staff and students and families about the inaccessibility of the buildings, and we ended up putting in the bond the 2020 bond a measure that was $33 million to ensure the first floor of every school building was accessible. And that's happened, which is great. So in one fell swoop, it's not completely done because we still have the second floors, but a huge expansion of accessibility. So I think it's I appreciate the recommendation to pay-as-you-go. I also think we also need to look at what are the other priorities. I think one of the things in terms of the motor vehicle, not the motor vehicle tax, the rental tax, although it's not available to 2031, just, you know, there's a lot of people already wanting to spend that money for the county. So I think we need to be really vigilant about how we think about those resources and what the county's needs are and what our legal obligations and frankly our moral obligations. And I say all this because I noticed on the map there's absolutely no ramps in District 3. However, this is, I think, should be a countywide priority, and I'm very supportive of it. And like I say, I think we just have to keep our eye on the ball and so appreciate this. Sort of, here's what it would take, because now we all know what it would take, and that allows us to start setting goals and prioritization. So thank you. Unless there's any further comments or questions, we'll wrap it up. Thank you very much for the presentation. I'm sure this will be part of our active budget discussions as well as anything we talk about the bonds.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Our next agenda item is another work session by the County Commission, so I think we'll move to the table. This is on deflection. We've had multiple conversations. We had the annual report that was provided us with a lot of data. I think we've had some good discussions. Commissioner Singleton has put some ideas on the table, proposals on the table, as has DA Vasquez, who has a separate component of deflection to implement. So I'm looking forward to this morning's discussion, and we'll take just about a 5-minute break so that we can move forward and get ready for the work session. Relates to deflection. And like I say, we've had a series of discussions already, and we also received our annual report that sort of gave us a snapshot of sort of the first year. We'll start, I'm going to ask Commissioner Singleton, who has been my partner in bringing these forms forward for the commission to kick us off, and then I'll follow that, and then we'll have a panel, and then we'll open it up for discussion.
Thank you. I just want to start by appreciating staff, our provider, and all of the guests who came today to have this conversation. It's really critical, we feel, as a board, to make sure we're hearing perspectives from everybody who's involved in this deflection program to really help inform our decision-making. It's very clear to me that the board wants to see the deflection program succeed, even though each of us may have a different perspective on the state of the program and what specific changes we'd like to see. All of us at the core want a program that centers the individual human being and making sure that they can be successful, and I think that's some of the shift that we're wrestling with now. I want to acknowledge that the department and leadership team have been clear about what the deflection program success meant up until today, and part of this conversation is, as board members, we would like to push ourselves a step further and define success as it is for that individual accessing deflection. It's part of why I put out a press release about 2 weeks ago about reforms I'd like to see. I know that, as Commissioner Brim Edwards mentioned, our DA has also shared some things that he would like to see. And I know I've heard from other folks in our previous work sessions some of the content of what they would like to see. Just want to also appreciate you, Commissioner Brim Edwards, for working with me to bring this forward, and our staff to really put together, I think, some critical information that we need to talk through today, and likely a third work session. I want to briefly just frame the purpose for the work session, and then I'll turn it back over to you. So goals and intentions for today is work through some outstanding questions. In a moment, after we have some presenters, I'll share a little bit about what were some of the takeaways from our last work session that we were hoping to have answered. We want to review and assess information that we've received to date. There will likely be some recommendations for program improvement, so I appreciate our health department colleagues being here as well today. And then looking at the next action steps that the commission could take to really increase access to the treatment components of our behavioral health system and increase positive outcomes for people. So with that, I will turn it over to you, Commissioner, for your opening comments.
Thank you, Commissioner Singleton. So for the past year, as we were voting on funding to stand up the Pathway Center, and also just having discussions about the initial design of the program, I've really been pushing for what I see as better outcomes from our deflection program and really more effective use of our tax dollars. We do know that deflection from jail is a more effective, and deflecting someone into treatment and giving them a path to recovery is a more effective approach to addiction than sending somebody to jail. I'm really glad that with a new commission, we have an opportunity to drive and support a reset of the deflection program to sort of build on the work that was done this year and hopefully improve outcomes. From my perspective, our deflection program needs to have connections to treatment. It needs greater accountability, and we need to be looking at how we can fund and support the needed services that will help make deflection a success. I want to thank the Health Department and also the Department of County Assets for the answers to all the very detailed answers to the questions that I asked at our last meeting. I also want to appreciate Commissioner Singleton for putting on the table, I think, some really important, like outlining some important components that sort of build out that sort of continuum of care and the sort of pathways that we know need to happen. I do remain concerned about the accountability of the program, and I'm concerned about the current criteria for success and eligibility that were primarily developed out of public view. Again, I really believe that our work needs to happen in public because that will make it stronger and also, I think, provide greater support for the work that we need to do. The first year's data, I think we all know it was sobering when we saw it, that about 600 people going through the deflection center, which is, I think, significantly fewer people than expected given the amount of the investment, and with a limited number of those people accessing treatment in the first sort of 30 days. In addition, the utilization of the sobering stations, which was sort of a different added component, has also been way less than anticipated. And we just know from sort of being out in our neighborhoods and our streets that those are needed services. So better utilizing sobering beds and services is another component that, in addition to deflection, that we want to increase access to. My priorities for the reset, and again, I want to thank Commissioner Singleton for putting proposals on the table already, would be really to continue to evolve our program and using data and sort of best practices to really enhance connections, promote treatment, accountability, and public safety. The program reset components that I'm interested in sort of adding to the table of ones that are already there, redefining what success is. I think we need to set a higher standard for what constitutes success. And I think it's really important for the individuals that are in deflection, but also for the sort of accountability for our tax dollars and also to, let's say, improve outcomes. And in addition, I'm supportive of expanding the eligibility charges for deflection. This is a decision and a responsibility of the district attorney. I'm supportive of that if it comes with expanded accountability. I'm supportive of the proposed changes that the district attorney has put on the table that he's proposing will go into effect on January 5th. I'm also supportive of requiring regular public reporting to the commission and our partners so that we can analyze data, understand outcomes, look at what sort of system changes need to be made, also to inform, so we can inform our budget process and our oversight. I hope the reset also, part of that is continuing to identify the gaps and barriers in our behavioral health continuum, and then how are we planning to fill those gaps. I also hope that our reset will look at and propose changes to the oversight and governance so that the county commission is actively monitoring outcomes and advancing system adjustments as needed and ensuring the data on the program is transparent. We're going to have an opportunity to discuss all that today, and I want to just recognize some of the partners we have. We're going to have some individuals speak, but we also have other partners in the room, and I really appreciate them being here so that they can be part of the discussion and we can hear your insights, what you need to help us make the deflection program more successful and improve outcomes. This morning we have Chief Goldberg from the Gresham Police Department, Commander Hughes from the Portland Police Bureau, Janie Gullickson from the Peer Company. I think Janie is virtually. We have John Carp Evans with the Peer Company, Dr. Dan Hoover from OHSU, Stephanie Howard, Community Safety from City of Portland, Tony Vazina with 4D Recovery. So I think in our discussion, people should feel free if we have questions for partners in the room. And again, I really want to thank everyone for the work that's been done so far. And of course, we have also the Health Department, who are sort of a cornerstone foundational piece of the program. So if people have questions, we can ask them. To kick us off, we have some partners in this work who will have some opening comments just to get the discussion going, and then I think we'll go back to Commissioner Singleton to do some frame up. So with that, I'd like to ask Grant Hartley, District Attorney, Vasquez, and also Dr. Dan Hoover, who I believe is virtual, to get ready to present. And maybe, Mr. Hartley, we could start with you and then go to Dr. Hoover and then to DA Vasquez. Oh. It's, go first. Okay. Thank you for your willingness to kick it off and being part of the discussion so far.
Probably turn that on. And thank you, commissioners, for having me and involving me in this work session and really in the Deflection Project sense. My name is Grant Hartley, for the record. I am the Multnomah County Director for Metropolitan Public Defenders. Before I start to stumble through the notes that I took in preparation of this, I wanted to give an introduction on sort of my engagement with deflection. As a public defender, I've always been interested in the concept of deflection. I've seen firsthand the issues and that the criminal legal system has had on many of my clients, and the way that it has often exacerbated many of the things that they struggle with that led them into the criminal system in the first place. And so trying to find ways to deflect people away from that has obviously always interested me, even before 4002 and the recriminalization discussion. But during that is when I first got involved in actual construction of deflection programs, was working in the 4002 legislative work group, where deflection really came to be a policy of the state. I was also honored to be a faculty member for the OHSU's inaugural deflection echo series put on by Dr. Hoover, where I helped develop educational series for counties who were looking to implement deflection programs. I also sat on the grant review committee for the county deflection programs, and have talked to countless programs around the country and learned what has been effective for them, what has not, lessons learned, LEAD in Seattle, PAD in Philadelphia, civil citations really throughout Florida. I've tried to really understand what helps in these, what populations should be targeted. And so, in response to sort of what the goal is, from the beginning, the goal has been to help people take steps towards recovery. And I say steps because that progress is incremental. The road or path to recovery has a lot of bumps, it's got a lot of detours, and it is not something that can be forced. And it's definitely not something that can be forced through the prosecution of a low-level crime like possession of a controlled substance. Our system really has demonstrated for decades that fact, that low-level possession-driven treatment courts have really always had dismal results, and that has been here in Multnomah County and elsewhere. And that was all pre-fentanyl. That was before we had the acuity of individuals that we have now. The criminal system is, simply put, a blunt tool with very few mechanisms to change behavior. It is jail and fines. And it is not designed to, nor effective at addressing these societal issues like substance use disorder. And so my goal for this program has always been to deflect as many people away from the criminal system as possible. And that is not only because I believe that the criminal system is ineffective at addressing these issues, but it's also because our criminal system here in Multnomah County is currently incredibly overburdened. Obviously, there is a public defender shortage, and we do not have enough public defenders to represent individuals who go into the system for these charges or many others. But it goes well beyond that. The court does not have enough judges to send cases out to trial. We just heard at the recent Criminal Justice Advisory Committee meeting that we are expecting that to only get worse, especially with the upcoming wildfire litigations. And the jail is obviously understaffed and overwhelmed. Our access to our clients has been dramatically reduced, and the cycling of people through the jail for low-level PCS charges will only exacerbate those issues. The DA's office has had its own staffing issues, which, while it does not affect their ability to charge cases. It does affect the attention that they can pay to cases, which we have seen especially in lower level misdemeanor cases. And of course, Department of Community Justice, the individuals who will be tasked with doing probation if people go through the criminal system for these, has had incredible budget cuts, both locally and statewide. And frankly, has limited resources, and it is my opinion that those limited resources should be focused on individuals who present a risk to the community and need to be supervised in the community, not to low-level possession charges. And so we should be figuring out ways to take pressure off of the system. We should be looking for release valves for the system, not adding additional cases in. And as far as my measure of success goes, it is fairly simple. It is progress. It is merely progress. That if an individual shows some progress towards the road to recovery, that is engaging in referral for housing, that is getting an ID, connecting with a peer, participating in detox, that is all incremental positive steps. And that is also more than would be achieved if those cases entered the criminal system. And to the extent that there are complaints about the success of the deflection program, I would encourage this commission to also inquire about the success of our criminal legal system when it comes to addressing these issues. What are the success rates there? What are the connections to services occurring there? Because it is simply not fair, nor is it productive, to judge these alternatives to the system in a vacuum, to not judge them against what they are an alternative to. And frankly, the legislature recognized that with HB 3069 when it changed the successful outcome definition for deflection in this most recent session. I was, again, involved in the work group where this was developed, and they changed it to successful outcome means an outcome that recognizes that recovery pathways are necessarily individual and that it is measured in engagement in case management services and improvements in quality of life and stability factors and public safety. Now, most of that definition was actually pulled from the SAMHSA definition of recovery. And so, again, the state is recognizing that we need to shift our expectations when it comes to what we should expect from these programs. And I do, as we are discussing success, I do want to take a quick moment to address the term accountability. It is something that comes up very regularly in a lot of the policy arenas that I'm in, and it is really often used without ever being defined. And it can mean different things to different people, and it often does mean different things to different people. For some, it is merely a synonym for punishment, or for if someone does not do something, we will hold them accountable, and that means punish them, especially when it comes to the criminal system. So, if a person does not complete treatment, we must hold them accountable. In the criminal system, that means jail. That is what that means. And I think that we need to really focus on that and keep that at the forefront of our minds as we're discussing what is success and what can we expect from this program. To me, accountability is based in relationships. For addiction, it requires a person to really acknowledge the harm of their use, both to themselves and to their community. It requires making difficult life changes and really accepting the help of others. It is really a process, not a punishment. And it is a path that consists of many steps, and those are all, again, incremental steps, but each one of those is important, even if they seem small when you're looking at them on a spreadsheet or in a chart. So again, much like success, when you hear the term accountability in these discussions, I would ask you to take a moment and ask what that word means to the person who is using it, ask how it fits into this discussion that we are having. So now moving sort of to the...
I think we said like 5 minutes.
Okay.
And you're at like 8 or 9. But,
Okay.
maybe summarize,
Long-winded
and I'm sure
public
we can come
defender
back.
is a trope at this point. I think that the things to improve this program are in front of us. It is case management, it is engagement, utilizing the organizations that are already doing outreach by providing them lists of individuals who are in these programs so that when they meet them on the street, they can follow up on the referrals that were made in those service plans. That is an easy short-term way to address this. Long-term, it is getting case managers to actually do that work. expanded eligibility, which has been discussed, and then also community engagement, making sure that the individuals that are working at that Pathway Center are more connected with the services to which they are referring, so that those relationships can help make sure that people are actually connected. Again, I apologize for going over.
That's okay.
Just rambling through my notes here. Thank you.
That's all right. Thanks for kicking it off and sharing your insights.
Of course. Thanks.
At this point in time, I'm looking at the screen. Dr. Hoover, are you ready to go?
Yes. Good
5
morning.
to
Can you
8
hear?
minutes of sort of framing insights or perspectives or thoughts you'd like to share?
Sure. Can you hear and see me all right?
We can.
Good. I'm going to try to share my screen with some slides that I prepared. I'm actually in Bend at the State Sheriff's Association meeting where I was already planning to talk about deflection, so I had some slides ready that I've repurposed for you. And thank you, Vice Chair, and thank you, Commissioners, for inviting me to talk about deflection and provide a little bit of a level setting for the working session that you're having. Just by way of introduction about me, I'm an addiction medicine and internal medicine physician at OHSU. Also work at Tuality, the old Tuality Hospital, Hillsborough Med Center now in Washington County. And I've been doing research with Clackamas Jail, and then working with many of our Oregon jails on addiction treatment and medication treatment for opioid use disorder. The exciting new role I took on last summer approximately was assisting counties with deflection implementation, and my OHSU team has a contract from the Criminal Justice Commission to do that. So that's kind of the piece I'm talking from today. First, I want to show this image from SAMHSA that I think is really useful for everyone to know. This is the sequential intercept model, and this was developed as behavioral health partners wanted to engage with the justice system partners and start to provide treatment at these different points that people would be in the justice system. And as you can see here, deflection is very early, so we say it's at intercept 0 or 1 when folks are in the community or when they're starting to encounter law enforcement officers. Later, as people progress into more and more justice system involvement, we have what's called diversion, and some diversion activities could be like a treatment court or someone engaging with a PO, and the PO is telling them to get treatment and helping arrange that in like a case manager capacity. So deflection is very early on. And then in Oregon, we wanted specifically officer deflection. We wanted to incentivize that with our House Bill 4002. And it's essentially the last stop of deflection before someone is in that system. It's important to recognize that officer deflection is involving law enforcement, but it's always pre-filing, not filing a charge. The person's getting into deflection. There's some different legal mechanisms for how to do that. But once the charge is filed and you're trying to help them, it would be considered diversion. So what are some of the first steps that we've taken in the year 1? This is from the Behavioral Health Initiatives report that OHSU and CJC collaborated on together, and just shows the numbers of people coming into deflection. So around 2,100 deflection events, 1,700 of those individuals are eligible to be in the deflection program. Some are not eligible and fall out of the cascade here. And then about 1,300 enrolled into deflection. And this includes, this is basically the entire first year of data up until August this summer. And we have people, of course, that have completed and are still in the program, and about half we know that did not successfully complete deflection. If we look at how are these deflections happening and who's the first point of contact, it's primarily law enforcement. And this was with intention for how our legislature defined our initial direction to go with deflection. We call this the officer intervention pathway of deflection. And in Oregon, it's 81% of those deflections are being initiated where the first point of contact is a law enforcement officer. A couple of key numbers to be aware of from the year 1 is we know that 31% of these officer deflections are successful. Counties are individually defining what is a success, but that's a decent rate of success to me, because I think about this population not seeking treatment, not necessarily interested in making changes, but they have this encounter with an officer, meet the deflection program, and 31% of those officer deflections are turning into successes. And then there's a large number of services that people are receiving. So 400 people received outpatient or intensive outpatient treatment, 128 received inpatient detox, or what we call withdrawal management, and 184 received housing supports. Again, this is a disengaged population that faces a lot of barriers, and we wouldn't say that they're independently seeking treatment. So some of these results are impressive to me. I want to share 2 charges as it relates to kind of our expectations for deflection in this first year. So the first is about co-charges. And we had a misconception, I think, with Measure 110 that we could decriminalize and our jails would be empty of people that have substance use disorders. And that's absolutely not what we saw. And a large part of this is the co-charges that come along with possession or drug arrests. And so in this example I'm giving you, we had about 8,800 possession arrests. Only 2,300 of those had the possession charge alone with nothing else attached to it. So actually the majority, the 3/4, have additional charges, and they're charges of these kinds. This is just a screenshot from the dashboard that the Criminal Justice Commission updates regularly. But things like trespass and failure to appear and theft to bench warrant violations, these are the common charges that come along with the possession charge, and that has made it challenging for deflection programs. Many deflection programs wanted to start small and make sure they could meet the demand for these services, and for them that meant restricting entry to people only with that PCS, that possession charge, and nothing else. However, most counties have opened their criteria, and they're now including these other low-level misdemeanors along with the possession charge. So this is as of actually May. There were 21 counties of the 28 doing deflection that were including the co-charges. Challenge number 2 I'm going to share here is about officer buy-in. And at the Criminal Justice Commission Summit, Dr. Campbell, who's in the audience with you now, had shared about a gap, essentially, where we're not seeing that everybody eligible for deflection is actually getting deflection. And I think it has been hard to pitch this to officers after Measure 110 in some ways. They also really have limited capacity to devote to a new initiative or doing the deflections. Some of the things I try to emphasize to officers, and one of the reasons I'm here at the Sheriff's Conference, is just saying this can actually save you time compared to arrests. It's saving your attention for maybe more serious crimes, and then you're actually intervening and hopefully not seeing these calls so much downstream. There's also just local differences for departments and how they do drug enforcement that we found a lot out about. So going to summarize that and try to stick to my time here. Promising early results with people accessing treatment that were not treatment engaging or not seemingly interested. Predicting the supply and the demand, so to speak, of deflection has been hard, and a big challenge has been these co-charges, and I think a continued sort of misconception that the population can be reached if we're just deflecting the PCS charges. Also, buy-in has been a challenge with some officers or some departments. Despite that, we still see that officer deflections are the most common. Those are the big numbers that we're getting. And the legislature wants more numbers to come into deflection. So that leads us to some interesting places about how do we make deflection available to others in the community and do it in the right way. We still want, like Grant Hartley was sharing, we want all the benefits of avoiding legal system involvement. So that's what I was going to share for a level set. Happy to answer any questions, and I have some comments about Multnomah County specifically I could share later, perhaps.
Thank you, Dr. Hoover. I understand, do you have a hard stop at a certain point? I just want to make sure that we hear your Multnomah County comments and have a chance to.
Yeah, thank you. Probably noon would be my hard stop.
Okay, then we should be fine because that's, I think, our hard stop too. Okay. Good. Thank you for being here and for being willing to be here virtually while you're over also talking to a very important audience. So I'm going to, in that case, since your hard stop is not right away, I'm going to ask DA Vasquez for just some introductory comments as well. And I'm wondering, while DA Vasquez is coming up here, Dr. Hoover, is it possible for us to get your slides? That'd be great for us to have as a reference point.
I sent those to one of your staff.
Okay,
they should be available on Granicus now.
Perfect, thank you. DA Vasquez.
Good morning, Vice Chair, Commissioners. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today. I appreciate the chance to discuss how the Multnomah County District Attorney's Office is going to be implementing Oregon's drug possession and deflection framework under House Bill 4002 going forward, and how this approach fits into our broad efforts to restore safety and livability in Multnomah County. I want to start by saying that with House Bill 4002, that has recalibrated how Oregon's response to addiction and substance use disorder. It reestablished certainly the misdemeanor for possession of small amounts of hard drugs while prioritizing a voluntary deflection first model, ensuring that a person encountered by law enforcement for drug possession is offered a connection service before entering the criminal justice system. That's something we agree upon. But I want to be clear. In Multnomah County, my focus is making this model meaningful to ensure it's not symbolic, but functional and responsive to the realities on the ground. It's important for the public and for all of us in this room to understand and to be clear about the district attorney's role under House Bill 4002. Prosecutorial decision-making remains entirely unchanged. This House Bill creates an optional pathway for district attorneys to participate in local deflection programs. But it does not and cannot require the DA's office to relinquish its independent authority to decide when a crime should or should not be prosecuted. The authority is constitutional, long-standing, and fundamental to maintaining public safety and accountability. And when I talk about accountability, that's almost really accountability of the district attorney. I'm the elected official and I'm accountable to the people. Participation in the deflection model is exactly that, it's participation. It's a collaborative process in which my office will be reviewing cases and determining whether an individual should remain on the deflection track or have charges in their case filed. Even once, to be clear, once charges are filed, House Bill 4002 provides additional off-ramps. It doesn't immediately go to jail and what we think of as traditional prosecution. In fact, the next step in that process is called conditional discharge. It's just a higher level of supervision. It is only after a defendant or an individual has failed to meaningfully engage at both the pre-conviction stages that they risk a criminal misdemeanor conviction. Even if after those multiple levels of failure, an individual decides that they are ready for treatment, there are always more off-ramps. And of course, these convictions, they built in automatic expunctions as well. But I want to be clear, nothing about House Bill transfers the core function, the decision to charge, authority to another agency. Nothing in the law gives service providers or other county body the power to decide who is not prosecuted. And nothing in this House Bill prevents the district attorney from prosecuting drug possession or related crimes when public safety and accountability demands it. The clarity is important for the integrity of our system and the public's expectation. Deflection is a voluntary tool, not a mandate, and it does not diminish the DA's responsibility to protect victims, safeguard neighborhoods, or ensure accountability when individuals are not availing themselves of the opportunity to change course. The district attorney's role in deflection framework is both practical and principled. Practically, we will be evaluating cases when they come through from law enforcement. We will identify when someone has successfully completed deflection and when their conduct, whether repeated refusal to engage in services or involvement in criminal activity, requires an immediate justice system response. But we are also the point of accountability. If a person declines services or continues to harm the community, the district attorney's office ensures there is a consequence and a pathway through the courts that can redirect them towards engagement. This isn't about punishment. It's about getting people back on track and getting them to that pathways that can lead to treatment, that can lead to sobriety, and away from falling deeper into addiction and escalating behavior. I want to emphasize a critical reality that I know all of you know well and have identified, that for deflection to work as intended, Multnomah County must provide meaningful connections to detox, treatment, stabilization services, and transitional housing. We must see law enforcement encounters as critical opportunities to disrupt cycles of harmful behavior, connect people to the services they need, and incentivize engagement. This is why I've been so encouraged by the proposals put forth for changes, including specifically by Commissioners Singleton and Moyer. These are the ways that we're going to help people get to where they need to be. To improve the system coordination is how we're going to make this program work. The issues to this point are not entirely due to a lack of treatment or housing services. They're due to the failure to make meaningful connection and to provide the support network to get people to those services. If we want safer streets, fewer overdoses, treatment and services need to be available as soon as we can when someone is ready to say yes. As the district attorney, I will continue to prosecute serious crimes, trafficking of drugs, trafficking of people, violent crimes, property crimes against businesses and residents, and address addiction-driven behavior that harms others. Accountability and treatment are not forces. Together, they create a structure that people need to recover and for the safety of our neighborhoods deserve. To be clear, my office is ready to work with others when we go forward to deliver on the promise of House Bill 4002 while maintaining clarity, independence, and responsibility of the district attorney's constitutional role. In particular, I welcome the input of the board on pathways that we can create to help someone be successful in deflection and to provide input on what successful deflection looks like. I want to take a moment, though, and respond back a little bit of some of the criticisms I've heard. Quite frankly, the statements by the defense are misguided. It's misguided advice that's been there from the beginning, and it's led us to the failures that we've had to date. It's at the very heart of why when we look at the numbers after a year, we see limited to no success. It's time for a new direction with new partners and new voices that actually want to build a program. The guiding principle of compassionate accountability should lead us as we go forward. The county should be compassionate and help those that are struggling with substance use disorder make meaningful progress towards treatment. But it is okay to hold people accountable on this difficult journey. Accountability can be having a peer step in and saying you're off track. Accountability can be telling someone they need increased supervision to get them to treatment. Accountability can be through drug treatment courts. I strongly disagree with Mr. Hartley. The stop courts here in this county helped thousands of people get to sobriety and treatment, had years of success. The treatment courts we have today do amazing work. It is because they use accountability as a tool to help people get to treatment. When it comes to the question of will people be prosecuted or not if they fail to engage or succeed in deflection, that question, quite frankly, has been answered by me, and we need to move on. The people of this community have elected me to make that decision, and I have made it. When it comes to the question about how we will support these people on this journey, this is where our service providers like 4D, Mr. Carpel Evans, Jenny Golicksons, and others, our health department, they can step in. This is where the county commissioners, you, can step in. The question of what success is, this is where we can collaborate. I want your input before these final decisions are made. The suggestions I've previously put forth is really a lot of what was floated by the county health department. But I'm very open to hearing from you and considering what meaningful engagement and treatment is. The suggestions, again, by Commissioners Moyer, Commissioner Singleton, certainly from what I've heard from Commissioner Brim Edwards and from Commissioner Vincent Jones-Dixon, as well as the chair, have all put forward are important in this discussion. Getting someone housing and stability is critical on their journey. And I believe that together we can come up with a collaborative definition of success which meets our community expectations, that when we're investing this large amount of time, effort, and resources into this program, we should be able to also expect outcomes in which we are helping people get to healthy, sober, and productive lifestyles in our community. Thank you.
Thank you, DA Vasquez. Let's agree, sort of frame up for our discussion. Commissioner Singleton, would you like to sort of frame the next portion of the meeting?
So just to remind folks, there's a couple of items during our last work session that I clocked as follow-up. So I just want to frame those because that's something I think some we're still dealing with that we haven't done, like defining success. And some I think are in the work. So I also invite anybody, if you want to speak to any of the action items, to do that as we move into the work session. So some of those items were convening clean and sober shelter providers to discuss referral pathways, training the staff at the center to conduct by name list and HMIS checks or get folks on the by name list, talking with the chat team to conduct any needed assessments on site like coordinated access, again reminding us that 92% of participants were experiencing homelessness. How can we bring homeless services to the site? Talking with County Human Services about overlapping clients and any opportunity for connection post-deflection or sobering. And then there were some asks around information needs. Some of that was the roles and responsibilities of these different bodies, who has decision-making rights over what's working well in other jurisdictions, which we heard a little bit about today, and I think some in our materials. And recommendations on extending time period for follow-up came up at our last work session. And then additionally, developing a legislative agenda that we can take into next short session so that we can start laying groundwork for what we need in the long session. And then any potential opportunities with HUD funds. There's a lot up in the air on the continuum of care, so I'm not going to go into the weeds on that, but to say there may be opportunities for additional funds for transitional recovery housing, acknowledging that that means we're losing funds for permanent housing at the same time, depending on what HUD does here. I think those were some of the big pieces that we heard last time, so I just wanted to ground us back in, one, so that folks don't have to feel like we have to repeat what was already said, but two, I think the idea is to build on that conversation and anything that you kind of saw or heard today or read in the materials.
Oh, okay. We should feel free to like make it more interactive versus.
The area that I'm really personally committed to working on, I mean, I'm committed to working on all of this, obviously, but I want to make sure that when somebody comes to deflection, that we can meaningfully meet them where they're at and support them through the recovery journey. And I think our current system has some gaps that make that level of commitment difficult. So I'm interested, if it's all right, I know we have Tony Venza here. I'm not sure if we have anyone from Turk or maybe also, I don't know if Anthony's here, just to, if they could give us their perspective on where the system is at now, and if we set our goal on what a system would be able to offer, where we need to talk about additional investment or changing our approach, if that's possible.
Yeah. Would somebody from the health department like to take that on? And just for the, I mean, that could actually take probably to the end of the, the time, so maybe just a, sort of a brief summary.
Real quick,
Yeah.
I got sent a list of questions to be prepared to answer, and so I responded in full to all of those and brought you guys a packet.
Well, awesome.
I gave one to
I
the
love
chair as
paper.
well. Yeah. I know how these things go.
Thank you. So go ahead, just make sure and put your name for the record, and then,
Yeah, my name's Tony Vesna. I'm the executive director of 4D. Just to clarify your question, you're kind of wondering what else can be done to ensure the effectiveness of sort of getting people from deflection into services? Like, where are the gaps at?
yeah.
Yeah, I think as kind of been referenced, it's about leveraging the resources you have. Commissioner Singleton, I think you looking at how COC funds could be used would be great, and some of the outreach capacity that could be expanded there. I've been advocating for more assertive outreach and included in our homeless service division around behavioral health, specifically to help follow people through their recovery pathway. I think what we've experienced at 4D in our street outreach is that you have to have ongoing assertive engagement. And we had a pilot program that we've worked with the county on. Outside of the officer-based deflection and new materials, you'll see 6 different pathways to what deflection can be, including pre-officer engagement. And we've had really encouraging results. And the best results that we've had is when we can do same-day assessment, or we can follow up with people multiple times. And I put some figures in there of some of the things we've been able to do, including on behalf of the chair's office to go up to the central library and do some outreach and engagement there. And we have same-day assessments at our outpatient treatment. And we're able to when we can get people same-day assessed, and then we can get them into services, it tends to be the most productive. The sobering center, I think you could expand access to that to providers, but I think you need to temper your expectations with what that single building is going to be able to accomplish. And it's 23 hours of service, and oftentimes people need more than that when they're on multiple different drugs and have multiple different health issues. And so I think that is a part of the system, but I'd be more looking to what is this crisis center you guys are going to have as sort of the long-term vision. And then transitional recovery housing has a non-existent funding source. Institutionally in the state, most of the resources have been given to permanent supportive housing. And when you look at the HUD recommendations for states, they really talk about having a balanced approach to those two investments. So you have good recovery housing infrastructure and some permanent supportive housing, and then that way you can get the right population to the right service, and you get a service match, which can be incredibly important for the health and safety and well-being and recovery of the individual over the long term, but also to minimize property damage and some other things like that, and some risks that are associated with operating permanent supportive housing if individuals aren't really in a place to be there and healthy. So to summarize, I think, expanding the outreach, providing more long-term assertive engagement for folks, because it is an incremental pathway, expanding some traditional recovery housing, and then really looking at what is your current swath of services, and how can you more effectively use those, include the sobering center, and then what is it that you're building towards when the crisis center opens?
Good morning. My name is Anthony Jordan. I'm the interim behavioral health director for the health department. I think a lot of what you just said about the housing and sort of the proposal you put forth about having clean and sober shelters, but I think in addition to that, having case managers and other people to sort of track people through the system and wraparound services once they go into those shelter services, and moving them to more the recovery housing so people can move out and still continue that while they're in treatment. I think another piece is what I think Commissioner Moyers, the last time we was here, we was talking about on-demand treatment, which we know doesn't exist. but trying your best to create as much less wait time as possible with developing relationship with sort of some of these services, which we already do. A lot of the services we get, especially around detox services, we get people in quicker than someone who would be working normally with other agencies because of those relationships. So really trying to get a system where we move people into treatment when they need it and it's available. As you know, there's a workforce shortage in our community, so treatment is very difficult to get in. And also, there's wait lists to get into treatment, even in outpatient services. So what do we do in the meantime? Trying to create a system about, like, if it's going to take a week before they get their first assessment, what do we do to wrap around services and have people like peers to sort of still stay with them while they're in shelters, getting them still providing some services? We would need some type of support like that. And then I think the third thing I think of is really the behavioral health, the BURNS, or the Behavioral Health Resource Network, and how some of those resources could maybe connect in those wait times, connect with them to sort of have a coordinated system to sort of like maybe hand them off to them. And, you know, I'm saying this like in the ideal world, but we would need to sort of track, we would need some kind of data system to sort of track all these moving parts so that we know if something is working and not working. So we would need the infrastructure to support all these efforts that we're talking about.
Thank you. I just want to jump in while you're both up here. I think, Anthony, I appreciate some of what you got into is that longer term picture that I think fits into the budget note work that I know y'all are grinding away on. I think one thing that I heard that feels really different is same-day assessment versus where we're doing referrals for assessment. So I'm curious what literally you all are doing there.
Yeah, so you got to think of it like you go to a doctor's office, and you may be able to get assessed for what's wrong with you that day, but you may not be able to get over to a specialist that same day, and you may have a lag period. So it's similar in mental health and addiction treatment. So we did launch same-day assessments where we can assess somebody the same day. Anybody can walk in, get assessed. We can give them what their level of care recommendation is. And then the hope is that we can get them to the next level of care. When working with what we call deflection population, they have an assortment of really complex needs that they have to get addressed. Some of them are medical in nature, which have to be addressed before they could get into addiction treatment services. So what we have is we have our outreach teams. They'll bring people in when they're ready. We usually get 2 or 3 a week that are willing to. And then we'll give them that same day assessment so we can say, okay, here's your clinical pathway. A lot of the time that's withdrawal management or detox. And then since you guys opened up the Sobering Center to community-based organizations, when we can't get somebody into detox right then, we can be like, hey, we can get you over to the Sobering Center for 23 hours, which kind of holds them until we can, which just gives us a little bit more of a window. So I hope that answers your question, is the difference.
Absolutely. It's the physically taking the person to the center. I could go on a diatribe about the behavioral health system being so clinic-based and people have to show up for appointments, but I'll save that for another day. I do think that's
well, no, some of it's just like, does the next level of care have an opening as well, right?
Yeah.
So if they needed withdrawal management, those beds might be filled, or residential, those beds might be filled. And so it's like, we've assessed where you're at, we've made a determination sort of what level of care you need.
Yeah.
But is that next service open and available? And those withdrawal management and residential tend to have some clogs sometimes in them.
Absolutely, and I think that's part of where I'm coming at with the shelter. It's not the right spot, but at least they're not on the street and they're in a supportive, clean environment. Go ahead.
Can I make one small distinction? I know what you were probably getting to. So at the center, the difference between what he can do and what we can do is really about the license. So we don't have a certificate of approval to do assessments. We can do screenings, but not assessments. So when people come in, we take the screening, we do a pseudo, what you call a brief ASAM, but we can't do a full assessment because of the facility. If you do clinical services out of that, even an assessment, you would have to get that clinical license.
So even if I showed up to do an assessment for somebody, I couldn't do that on site because of a certificate?
If you had a certificate of approval, say Tony had a certificate of approval, I don't know how they do this, but you can do an all-site one, but you're acting on your certificate of approval. So
Okay.
whoever have the certificate,
Yep.
your personal approval, you could do it then.
Okay, this is something we got to crack, so I'm glad you brought this up. Thank you.
Okay.
Great
Yeah.
issue.
Thank you.
I have a question, if I could, to Dr. Hoover. Yeah. But, thank you. One of the things that struck me is when we received information back from the health department just about what was happening in different places, and when I looked at the completion criteria, it was really surprising, just the divergence. And so I don't know if you have any initial thoughts on this, but I'm looking at, so for example, like Clackamas County, to have successfully completed, the participant has to have met all the requirements, not just one. In Marion County, you have to have ongoing engagement for 6 months versus like 30 days here in Multnomah County. Washington County, the participant would have need to successfully engage in substance use treatment and demonstrated that they are likely to continue to engage in substance use treatment. Again, I just look at compared to the sort of standards within Multnomah County, the other counties seem to have sort of much more, I've described as robust requirements and longer periods of time. And I'm wondering, maybe you could share like kind of what you've seen and either the strength or weaknesses of any of those criteria, if that's something you feel.
Yeah, I can try to speak to that, Vice Chair Brim Edwards. I will say there's not a comparative evaluation that the state has done to say which of those different success criteria is producing the best health outcomes or the best legal system outcomes. I would expect to see more evaluations like that coming in the next 1 to 2 years. And part of that is that we can't really determine someone's criminal legal system trajectory in this first year. We need to have that kind of lag time to see where they end up or don't end up in the system. I think Multnomah County has all the right people on the policy work group, which is the House Bill 4002 leadership group, to basically decide from the different stakeholders who give input what is our individualized definition of success. That's actually a best practice to have a multidisciplinary leadership team like you have to come together on the definition of success and what is going to work the best for your community. But there isn't really an established best practice about what success has to be. I think associated to this is to say, like, whatever you define success as for your program, we have to also look beyond that to the outcomes data of the participants, right? So like Director Jordan was talking about, how do we get more people to access those referral services that they're initiating referrals, but we want everyone to get the access. So can we bolster the partner relationships? As Commissioner Singleton's talked about, can we have an inventory of temporary or transitional housing where people can be reached by the case managers so that we don't just lose track of them? Maybe even they can be starting on medication treatments or something. So I think we have all the framework of that, actually, with the way that Multnomah County's team produces reports and actually does a very excellent job in terms of posting data publicly. I like to say positive things too, so that was one of my positive notes, is I really like the data that is produced, because you have the whole kind of improvement framework you need. If you make changes now, you'll be able to see how your referral rates improve or your success rates improve.
Great, thank you. Just to build on that, I'm wondering if somebody from, I think this would be maybe the county health department. I was looking at the notes from the leadership team, and there's this tier 1, which is the program we have now with the success criteria and eligibility, the charges, and the program engagement. And then there's a proposed tier 2 that for co-charges. that seems more robust, and I'm curious about why we wouldn't have those same criteria. I don't know, does anybody want to speak to that? And I know you can't speak for the whole group, but it was just curious because I was interested to see the notes. There was, looks like if we're going to expand it, looks like there is different criteria and different eligibility. So I'd be sort of interested of like, if that's good for people who have co-charges, as we're thinking about just system evolution, would that be a natural evolution to apply that also to the sort of those that just have the PCS?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Vice Chair. For the record, my name is Natalie Amar. I use she, her pronouns. I am the Deflection Program Supervisor. And I just want to make sure that I understand your question. You're interested in some information about the proposal that was submitted to the leadership team about different tiers potentially for deflection. Yes, so just for context, that proposal was prepared by the Health Department that could show different options depending on individuals' entry points into deflection should the leadership team decide to expand the eligibility criteria to include co-charges. So this is really dependent upon that decision to make a policy change. And what the Health Department proposed was that if you know, because there are ongoing discussions at the policy level within that group, we proposed some different options for consideration that would address some of the concerns around opening up that eligibility criteria to allow for charges beyond the PCS to bring people into deflection. So one of the options was to create and again, this is as you will have seen from the notes, this is also dependent upon the availability of funding to be able to do additional work during what would become a 90-day period of engagement for individuals that would fall into a second tier. So we would need the capacity to be able to track and continue to engage either through peer services or outreach that we currently don't have built into the program. We would need that capacity to make sure that during that extended period of engagement, there's an added value for folks and that we could increase their chances of successfully completing. And we would require, should that resource become available and should this policy direction be decided as the way forward, we would expect continued touch points with individuals, with case management, again, peers going out to where people are, making sure that they can remain engaged, and then with those, the added capacity to support, then accompanying that would be additional expectations around what people are doing when they are engaged in the program, and then along with that, what success could be would look a little bit different. So engagement in something treatment specific was one of the proposals. For example, and I'm speaking without looking at the document, so if there are follow-up questions, I can provide answers to those at a later date.
I really appreciate that.
Sure.
And maybe the one piece that didn't get answered is if those are things that might, and acknowledging that there's resource implications, but if those are things that might improve success or engagement, is there a reason why we wouldn't want to also have those apply to, we wouldn't also want to apply that, some of the eligibility criteria or the program engagement period, link the time to those that just have the PCS charges?
I think it really does tie to the resources. So if you look at the total number of folks that were deflection eligible in the last year, we've heard the number of 2 per day coming through, so there were 606 referrals. In fact, if you look at who received a PCS charge in Multnomah County, the total eligible population would have been 3. So 2 sounds low, but the maximum, the ceiling, was actually only about 3 people on average. And then if you were to have included all of those individuals who were arrested for a PCS and some other misdemeanor, it rises to around 4.5 to 5 people. So we're talking about a small population, and so if we have limited resources, if the eligibility includes other crimes, that was the reason that it would be an increased level of accountability. That's how the proposal was kind of, what the proposal was designed to address, is that you have individuals who aren't just brought to deflection because of a potential PCS, but it's a PCS plus something else. And so taking into account, you know, the kind of the need, the perceived need to increase what would be required of individuals if they're given access, but they also have other charges, that's what was behind that intention. So to put that many resources into a small population, into the small maximum number that we could get, on balance, maybe that, you know, is not the best use of those resources, but if you're expanding the population, you're gonna get more people in, then maybe that shifts, that tips the scales a little bit in a different direction.
Okay, thanks. I was just noticing for here in like Jackson County that successful completion for the individual require 10 progressive contacts in a 30-day period, which seems like a lot.
Yeah. You know, I want to go with something what Dr. Hoover said. It's really hard to compare what the success things. Like you could say we are doing 30 days and someone doing 60 days. You wouldn't really know until about a year out. It could be 30 days could be just as good as 60 days. I think what we've been really trying to focus on is really to expand the eligibility and maybe, you know, some of the things that I think you spoke about, like the follow-up, and we believe that would be successful, and we'll let what our program sort of outcomes be, but I think what we've been really focused on is really trying to make this the most successful programs. I know the DA has a plan. It's really like what is going to be the greatest impact on the individuals and having the greatest success and using the best practices. And I think Dr. Hoover also talked about co-charges is one of the things that we are trying to do to sort of increase the numbers. But going back to the services, I think some of the work that you put forth and some of you have talked about, I think if we can come together and really focus on the services, our outcomes will be good. I think we would have less people being charged by the DA. We don't want people going to the jail. That is not a place for them. And I think someone has outlined they're not going to get the services that we should be responsible for, and what we're trying to do is to get to that. Even, you know, in some places in every community, they have their own sort of, you know, way of doing and way of practices. But I think for the purpose of us, I think like this is good. This has been a great bringing this together. I think is what we're really trying to get to is what is the best services, what is the best practice for us in our community. That's what I think we're trying to get to.
I'm sorry.
Sorry, can I just one thing on that? I think one of the challenges is we haven't done the landscape analysis. And so I think, you know, I'll do some follow-up after this. Have been working with the COO's office on kind of tracking some of these because I can appreciate that it may be additional resource there, but the question still remains for me. If you're estimating a resource need based on the silo of the deflection program, then we're not acknowledging or leveraging existing skills and capacity in the homeless services system. We have peers there, we have outreach workers, we have case managers. I think we need to be asking what will it take, but in a larger context than just the deflection program. And that's where I'm hoping we'll get to, because you may need some more resource, but I worry that you estimated at a need based on this proposal of moving it to 90 days, when the person is still going to be back outside on the street in the current state of affairs. And I think my goal is to stop that from being a revolving door and actually get them into homeless services so that there is the ability to find folks to do that connection and connect with the staff at Turk House as well, and at the Deflection Center and Sobering Center to work together, right? You're creating an interdisciplinary team if we do this right.
I agree with you, and I 100% agree with you, and I think what happens for us operationally, you know, we're operating from a grant with certain data requirements, and I think sometimes we have contracted with other providers and sometimes can't get, you know what I'm talking about, is is some operational things. So I think what we was talking about, the infrastructure, is to make sure that we are able to create the data and all those other things so there's less administrative burden on the providers. I think that's some of the support that we are talking about.
I'm going to call Commissioner Moyer,
Yeah.
and then I want to go to Commissioner Jones.
I'm a little concerned, and again, I haven't participated in those conversations, so I don't know the origin or who has said what. I've been very open. I would love to get to a place where we can expand charges. I am very concerned that we're not ready to do that until we show better outcomes for this population. So I'm a little nervous about cart before the horse. Not that I don't want to, but I mean, this is a balance between public safety and a service-oriented approach. I am a wild supporter of recovery and that recovery is possible, and I view very much our role as a county to make sure that that path is as supported and evidence-based as possible so that people who engage in that path have the best chances for success. I'm totally on board with that. My concern here is it is a leap of faith that I want us to earn to add additional charges. And I'm worried if we spend our time preemptively planning for additional charges before we do some of this hard work, some of this, like, how are we making sure the population that currently is eligible for deflection is integrated better in our homeless services, that pathway to assessment and step one and case management is locked in. And I'm not, I don't think that the requirements should be universal. Like, I think a possession charge is one thing, a trespass or a whatever on top of that might have a little bit more. That's not my wheelhouse. But I do feel like I don't want us to get ahead of ourselves because this is a balance and a partnership, and there are decision makers who have to believe that the infrastructure is there. I do want to say, for everybody listening, I am not criticizing the work of Turk House or any other people involved in our deflection program. They are doing what we designed. So I just want to make that clear that, when we are talking about this is not a criticism of the people who are doing what we asked them to do. This is about, we've got a year of data now. We have a better sense of what other people are doing. We're learning what the balance is. I think we have to look at the resources versus the outcomes. And so I'm really wanting to make sure that we are laying the foundation and looking at where we're at today and saying, are we maximizing outcomes for people? Are we balancing public safety with, and so one of the conversations I'd love to have potentially with the next panel is potentially the law enforcement perspective of what's working, not working, frustration, if that's possible. Yeah, if that's cool.
I just thank you, Commissioner, for that statement, and I think it would be interesting to include others in that table. As the Health Department, we respond to queries. We are not part of the policy decisions that come out of the leadership team. So just to be clear, what was provided by us to the leadership team were options that were requested for consideration. So it's not a position by the Health Department. I just want to make sure that that's clear. So further conversation would be great.
Thank you. I'm going to turn it over to Commissioner Jones-Dickson.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the presentations, and DA Vasquez and Director Hartley and Dr. Hoover for being here, and Tony as well. Would love to have Commander Hughes come up and Stephanie Howard to share that perspective to build off of Commissioner Moyer's points, and then I'll just have a few comments post that. Welcome.
Good morning.
Good morning, Commissioners. Good morning, Vice Chair. My name is Brian Hughes. I've changed roles since my last appearance here. I'm currently the Assistant Chief of Operations for the Portland Police Bureau. My name is Brian Hughes, and my pronouns are he, him. Thank you for having me.
Good morning, Stephanie Howard, she, her pronouns. I'm the Director of Community Safety for the City of Portland, which really means I get to work with lots of our public safety leaders, with our Deputy City Administrator for Public Safety, and I specifically oversee programs including the Office of Violence Prevention, Portland Ceasefire, and Portland Street Response.
Specifically, would you like to share what our officers are foreseeing, or just your perspective on how things are going, and then areas of improvement and what might be helpful?
Yes, thanks, Commissioner Vince Jones-Dixon. The Portland Police Bureau's role in this is to serve as the primary operational gateway to the deflection program in bringing people suffering from addiction on the streets of Portland to the facility. And I know we talk about the daily use rates and averages, but I want to highlight the amount of people. I think we're up to about 520 now, people that were not taken to the county jail and given a chance and hope at a life of sobriety. I think that's commendable when you look at the total data. But I sit here before you today to talk about some areas that I think that the program might be able to be strengthened a bit. The concern that I have, and Chief Day also shares this, is that the level of accountability and engagement with the program is of concern. That people can walk away immediately after the officer leaves is a concern. It's a concern for the officers as well, for their work, when they make the effort to transport somebody there who would have previously gone to jail, and given them the option of taking up treatment that the person chooses not to. And from an addiction perspective and standpoint, I know people in the room would probably be better versed at this than I am. We are dealing with an extremely powerful drug, the drug of fentanyl. And some of the conditions that my bike officers and neighborhood response team officers see people living in as a result of fentanyl is disturbing at times. And when you see it and understand it, then it helps to understand how powerful that drug is and what a scourge it is on our city. So accountability would be one aspect of it. The other area I think that we can have some improvements is some of the discussions that we've already had today about bringing actual services to the people while they're in that moment of being able to potentially receive them. Simply receiving a referral to a service, I think, is kind of where what we're seeing seems to lack a little depth for me. I think we could do a better job at that. Officers they make referrals and facilitate transports when appropriate. Transports is an issue that I've discussed repeatedly with this group, as well as the executive team for deflection. I did review the RFP that's out for, and maybe it's in now, but for the sobering facility, and I was happy to see that there is a component in there for transport. I just want to emphasize that it's just as important to transport people on the front end as it is on the back end. You know, we focused, I think, in the past on transporting on the back end for neighborhood livability concerns. And it seems as though that's working well at the Pathway Center where it is now. But I think, and Mr. Vesna talked about this earlier in his presentation about some of the higher rates of success are when some of the CBOs are bringing people to the deflection pathway or sobering pathway. And that's a method I'm familiar with from early on, back in my early days as a police officer with the Cheers van and people with lived experience being able to walk the walk and take people on that journey and encourage them to accept a better life than the alternative, which is my police officers handcuffing them and taking them to the facility. So I just want to reiterate support and encouragement for the transport aspects on the front end of this. And then finally, I just want to also convey that Chief Day and I support deflection as a foundational strategy for public safety and recovery. At the same time, the current levels of walkaways and non-engagement are concerning. The early expectation was a high-touch, intentional connection model, not simply a referral-driven one. I think the next phase of the program must focus on closing that gap to improve outcomes for individuals in the community. I'm happy to answer any additional questions.
I think I'm going to reiterate a lot of what has been said, but a couple of other angles that I haven't heard talked about are, I think when this deflection program was first conceived, it was always intended to change. It was always intended to learn and grow and, respond to the needs of the community and the needs of the population that we're serving. And so I think this is a welcome conversation from certainly the executive leadership perspective, and, from the perspective of stakeholders who are in this spectrum of care and trying to really help this group. One thing that I think I just would really like to underscore is the Deflection Center from a city administrative perspective is intended to be the place where first responders can take people so they can get help from trained professionals in substance use disorder, in behavioral health, and not have people in the field, like police officers, trying to make these calls, right? The point is to get them somewhere where they can get properly an assessment or, something that can help identify the right service for this individual's needs. Police officers aren't trained to do that. That's not what their job is, right? And so I think for me, looking at this, the Pathway Center and the future site, I really would like to see this be the triage place, right? The place where we can take people and there's no wrong door. We can take people here and if this place isn't the right service, we can get them to the right service. Because in that moment, that limited access that we have to remove barriers or people will not accept services. We have to make it as easy for them as possible to say yes. And that to me means centralizing those resources. It means making sure that when they are taken to that place, we can follow through on the back end of that and say, great, we can get you to a shelter right now. We can get you, to a sobering bed right now. And so I think that's where I would like to see some additional growth in how we're using both the Pathway Center and how we design the use of the future crisis site as well. And I'll also say, I think from a perspective of, Portland Street Response, for example, we have aftercare teams who I'm quite certain we'd love to, if we could design a resource day at the center, we can bring our aftercare teams. I'm sure there are lots of other providers, the CHAT team, which provides, medication-assisted treatment. I think there are lots of resources we could bring that could help build that sort of muscle memory and help, again, remove barriers so people who come to the center at those times, we're not saying, great, you need this and it's going to take 30 days. We want to say yes, and we want to remove barriers and help them right then, or else this is just kind of another decentralized, process that we don't need. Last thing I'll say, and I know that we'd all like to have more resources to support people in recovery and housing. I think that we can use this more efficiently. I think there are lots of resources that if used and coordinated better, we can get more impact from. And so I see this also as a way to centralize how we do that, how we consistently track data, how we are, consistently, again, trying to remove barriers to make it as easy as possible for people to say yes when there's help in front of them.
Great, I really appreciate that. And I just want to, congratulations on the promotion, reflect on just the engagement from Chief Day and others in the actually design of the permanent center, because many of the sort of learnings or insights from officers on the street who really don't want their option to be either taking somebody to jail or leaving them on the streets really did inform, I want to say, all the original planning. And this concept of transport to and from was very foundational. In fact, almost all of the sobering centers and crisis stabilization had that as an important component. Also want to just reflect on Tony's comment on assertive engagement or active engagement. That was also the Tucson model where, I mean, really people are getting engaged right at that moment when they may be receptive and thinking about it, that the services are there. So I just love both those concepts, but I also want to just thank both of you for your organization's participation in sort of the larger planning, and also appreciate the continuous participation in the continuous improvement model that we are engaged in, and how can we utilize both our resources, but also I would say the many resources from the city of Portland, but the other cities in the county as well.
I just want to quickly, just so folks are aware, assertive engagement is a core component of how all staff who are part of our provider community are trained. So it is what happens. I think the key comes back to the how do we actually bring people to the site so that there's the opportunity to engage them.
Do you have additional questions? Or?
Not for you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, commissioners.
Thank you.
Yeah. Just to for my seat, I think I've mentioned. I'll just make a few key points. One, I mentioned the use of technology, and as far as like managing and tracking outcomes, and also developing our system of care. That's something that you've been mentioning over the last 2 years, Director Banks. As far as that's what we're building out. And to build off the point that, Grant, that you made, I think you put it fairly succinctly, which I appreciated. We need to focus on case management, engagement, and what Tony said, assertive engagement. That's one of the key things, or key elements of our success in Gresham, both for homeless outreach. Again, I always say it's not perfect, but we relentlessly pursue those that are struggling and those that are most in need, and then connect them to services. Tony, are you guys driving our neighbors to the deflection center now, currently, or transporting? You are providing transport, right? Yes.
So, Commissioner Dixon, thanks for the question. Just as a reminder, in case people don't know, the project that we have going on in Gresham is a pilot project that we put together, where it's not necessarily people who are enrolled in the official legislative program of deflection, but it's in assertive outreach in partnership with public safety. And we're either going out and engaging people that we know would likely get snared up in the criminal justice system independently, or when instances come up that public safety is aware of individuals who don't pose an immediate threat to the community, but who would likely be able to benefit from treatment and recovery services. They'll call us and we work in coordination. And so we will drive people to the sobering center if we determine that, one, they're ready to go to services. Two, do they need that level of care, or is there a more comprehensive care that's available at the time? But we do utilize it as a sort of a gap in a moment to help them get on their recovery journey. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. So again, thank you for that service. I know we've seen like a 36%.
Yeah, and I give you guys some figures that are in there from some of the outcomes that we've achieved in the last year.
Yeah, and then lastly, I think one piece that was highlighted by DA Vasquez, it would be really good for us to invite Judge Odin Orr to come in to touch on just the START program as well. And just I think that's one piece that's missing from today. Outside of all of that, again, we'll continue to build off of what we have. So thank you.
Great, thank you. We did try and get one of the court representatives to come, but both the presiding judge and the criminal court judge weren't able to come this morning, but they did offer that if we had follow-up questions for the court system, obviously they're a key player in this as well. So we have that option that if we have questions we want to submit, they're happy to answer them. There's two things before we get to 12 that I'd like to ask Dr. Campbell to take a moment to sort of speak about his insights, but I also would like DA Vasquez to just maybe your thoughts. There's been a lot of conversation about the additional charges. If you have anything that you want to offer about the additional charges piece. And then we'll go to Dr. Campbell.
This will relate a little bit back to what I was talking about before, which is the core responsibility and role of the district attorney. And so when we're talking about expanding the program and should we add additional charges, I can't be clear enough here. That is not going to happen until we can have a model that is working with our existing practice. And so to be clear, there's an executive team and they can certainly talk about and propose things, but that is ultimately going to be my decision and my decision alone. And that is not going to happen until we can demonstrate better outcomes and better progress, a functioning program. So I don't want that to get lost. We can spend a lot of time talking about it, but that is where it comes down to, is that those type of decisions are the core responsibility of the district attorney's office.
I think this is Commissioner Moyer's, maybe not the point about the responsibility, but let's master the one piece as a core, before we build out.
Wait,
thank you for
don't
that point.
hang out for 1 second, and it might end up being a staff question, but you, in your memo, talk about examining rearrest data, and it just would be interesting to me at some point for us to be able to compare what you saw now with any changes we make to the program around rearrest so that we can understand the impact there. So I don't know if sometimes we do one-off data projects, so I'd be interested to know if there's a resource need around making sure we can do that in the future.
It seems like one thing I can say is that the data tracking around deflection has been very thorough and detailed, and I anticipate that will continue. I know my office is involved with that as well, and we will continue to look at that very closely. And again, I really think it's important that we also really focus on those definitions of engagement and success, and then define going forward what our expectations are for success. And that way we can all kind of have confidence that all this effort and resources we're putting towards this program, are they obtaining the outcomes that we truly want?
Yeah.
And I think the answer was yes to Commissioner Singleton's.
In long form, and then the short form is yes.
Okay, great. I think it was yes and, but I just wanted to make sure. Great. And then Dr. Campbell?
See.
Good morning, Commissioners. Thank you for having me. So for the record, my name is Dr. Christopher Campbell. I'm an associate professor of criminology and criminal justice at Portland State University. And my pronouns are he, him, by the way. A lot of my work focuses on community corrections, rehabilitation, as well as institutional corrections and such. But I'm kind of a jack of all trades. I've been working a lot in this area over the last several years, including being a co-investigator of a Measure 110 study that we've produced multiple reports on, and investigating, or at least evaluating, a lot of my work as an evaluation. So that includes treatment courts, drug courts, various types and approaches. I've also been a Fulbright Scholar for examining deflection, essentially how it's operated in England and Wales, and trying to bring that to a technical assistance help that I've been providing for the state through OHSU and Dan Hoover's work. So I should say that my role specifically with Multnomah County has been rather limited. We had a coach through RTA, technical assistance offerings, that would work directly with the county, and then me as a subject matter expert would come in every now and then for various requests and the like. So I should temper my responses with that, but at the same time, I've done as much reading as I can and talked to a fair amount of folks, especially with behavioral health, about what's going on. So. Did you have specific questions? I mean, I have all of my responses, but I imagine you have a targeted idea.
From your broader perspective, if you were going to have a goal of more people engaging on a path to recovery, what policy recommendations or what policies have other areas found success in, either policies or key service components? Just where do you feel like if our goal were to have more people successfully engage and hopefully lead toward a path of recovery, from your broader perspective, what are some areas that we should look at within what we are currently doing?
I appreciate that question. Thank you. So I want to preface this with the fact, like Dr. Hoover, I want to say something positive very quick. Given that the program here in Multnomah County hasn't fully stood up just yet, which is odd to think, and keeping in the context of evaluation, you're essentially figuring out, does the car run while we're still minus a wheel? And you're hoping that it's going to get you to where you think it's going to go. Nevertheless, saying, where do we think it's supposed to go, right? So being clear in those evaluation and those evaluation goals. Also, law enforcement referrals have been looking pretty good, considering, as behavioral health folks noted, that there could be up to 3, maybe 4 or 5 per day when they're serving 2, so it's relatively close, right? But there's still a lot to be done there. Now, if we were to assume that you would actually beef up the number of referrals, what would that success look like based on what we've seen? The warm handoffs are obviously the most important thing, and when I think specifically about what you're going to do, if it's going to be just this pathway for law enforcement intervention, or are you going to expand pathways to try to draw on more resources, perhaps, as Commissioner Singleton suggested. Additional pathways, I think, are good. You can draw on more resources, making sure that you have the appropriate assessments quickly as possible, the appropriate treatment as quickly as possible. All those things have kind of already been highlighted, right? But to make sure that we're particularly successful, among those who come through the door is addressing those criminogenic needs, thinking about coming in contact again with the system, right? And now I'm kind of bringing it into what we know, what works in keeping people out of the criminal legal system, specifically in addressing dynamic risk factors. That's essentially what you're doing in deflection. You're addressing dynamic risk factors of a population before they come in contact with the system, ideally. There are a number of avenues that you could look to find folks who would be eligible for deflection, which law enforcement, especially in this county, which there are multiple law enforcement agencies, have noted they don't necessarily have the capacity to address all the folks who are deflection eligible currently. That's even before you expand the path or the eligibility criteria. So I guess in short, I would think that the most successful approaches are going to be those that are attainable, feasible, progressive successes, essentially, things that somebody can actively get to, including incentives, including contingency management that isn't just punishment, to actually improve that successful that success rate. So if you want, of the counties you've already highlighted, Jackson County is one of those examples of the urban counties. More rural counties, Clatsop County is a fantastic example of how they're using different incentives and less so in sanctions and punitiveness and the idea of accountability, so to speak. I hope that answers your question.
Are they really getting 10 engagements in Jackson County in 30 days?
Well, according to the dashboards, yeah, they have a higher completion rate, but a lot of that is because you have a shorter window, but you also have a progressive. The idea is that it's attainable progressive things that somebody can actually address. Now, whether or not that person comes back to the system, we haven't been able to evaluate just yet, right?
Thank you. I appreciate that. I think it speaks to some of what we heard from Grant earlier as well of it might be the progressive steps. Sometimes step 1 is you have an ID. Step 2 is you've accessed a shelter bed, right? It can be very kind of incremental towards what that person needs to actually move on to those larger steps
Right.
around.
Small, meaningful victories are critical right, in developing that, absolutely. Do you have other questions specifically?
I have a lot of questions.
Okay.
I think we're getting to the action items.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. I really appreciate your perspective. And I would just say to everyone who came here today to add their input and their expertise, it's been exceptionally helpful. And we may and likely will reach out to you as we continue to plan for our next work session. I think some action items in addition to what are still on the table and some things in progress. What I captured today is defining accountability, defining success, and my takeaway is we're not going to just find one out there, that it's probably worth Commissioner, our staff's working together to put just a list of how folks are defining success so that we can just dig into it and make some decisions here as a board to then bring back to that leadership team. It's looking at opportunities for mobile teams for assessments. We also heard about transportation. Landscape map regarding services, just more broadly. Some of the work, again, leaning back into the how are we connecting to homeless services? What are existing peer programs out there that people can connect to? There's a question that was raised earlier that I think is critical. What are outcomes for people who do not go through deflection but go through the criminal legal system? It's worth us talking about so we understand those two different pathways. And then there's some questions to the courts that we'll send in follow-up. So what I have right now are what are the severity of charges that might actually be used to leverage in treatment courts. Those could look pretty different. Talking some about the court pathway and access to treatment if it's not at a level of severity for treatment courts. And then I think if others have questions, we can get some on the table now, but of course, please send them in follow-up to both Commissioner Brim Edwards and I, and we can put this list of questions together. And then there's just some data components that we want to track long-term around the rearrest data that I raised with the DA. But please, commissioners, anything else, action items that you took away that I did not name?
I mean, one of the items, and this is maybe a longer term, and it's also when we get into the budget, but sort of throughout the discussion, the impact on resources and how do we effectively use them, whether it was Grant's initial comments about if more of these people are going into the legal system, just like all the different pressure points, DCJ, the judges, the public defenders, the DA's office, like that's a resource allocation if people end up going into the justice system. But then the issue of how do we coordinate resources just within the county across departments. We also, this coordination in terms of with the city, you know, the models in every other city look more like a Portland street response type model versus law enforcement taking people to deflection, so that you're not using law enforcement for essentially for transport. So I also see like how do we think about that? And I also want to get back to also the question about governance and transparency, because I feel for this community, there's, well, for the whole state, a little bit of a whipsaw with, you know, ballot measure 110, then sort of the pullback, and now we have an initial 1 year of data, and I think it's just going to be really paramount that there be sort of transparency in like how things are changing, where we have successes, where we know that we need to change things. So that would be the sort of other piece for me. Do you have any other action items, Commissioner Jones-Dickson?
No.
Okay.
So I think I would love to just kind of, I think some next steps is our offices will work together to put all of this pen to paper and again, give you all some time if there's other questions you might have for the courts that we want to bring in. But just want to, again, really appreciate folks. I've loved seeing this dialogue really shift from my perspective to how do we create success for the human being, and that's where we started. So I just want to acknowledge, there's been a lot that's happened in between there, but I feel like we're coming back to what is the county's role? How can we actually support people who are eligible for and need to access county services when they touch the county already? How are we wrapping supports around them as opposed to asking them to navigate multiple complex systems, behavioral health system, homeless services system, two different things, and we're asking folks to try and navigate both of them at the same time. So I feel really hopeful about where we're moving. And of course, in the meantime, please let us know if there's something else that comes up for you that we're missing. I'll continue conversations with the COO's office, and I know they didn't come up to speak today, but I just want to acknowledge and appreciate the amount of work that they're doing behind the scenes as well to help move some of these action items that we're coming up with. So I look forward to our next steps and getting to a space for decisions. I think to your point, the who has decision-making rights over what is still a question to me when it comes to program direction and some of these next steps. But I do think, again, there's some low-hanging fruit that we could take care of now while we're gearing up towards what we know will be an important part of our budget conversation. So thank you all, and thank you to my colleagues for a really good discussion today.
Yep. And just one other thing I do want to add, just how do we use technology to manage the process as well? Yeah, and thank you all for the conversation. It was great.
Yeah, we're not going to be able to recreate the wheel financially, so the resource mapping and how do we be, I like the model, the concept of triage.
Yeah.
Because we can't do it alone. We are gonna have to pull partners together.
And yesterday, I ran into a number of legislators, and they very much are watching about the sort of resources that we received and how we're using that, and in a way, both wanting us to be successful, and also utilizing the resources that we have effectively. So with that, I'm going to adjourn the meeting.